Yeah, morning and welcome along to Sunday Supplement, the show where we digest, analyse and debate the sports stories inside the Sunday papers. So much to talk about this morning. Arsenal dumped out of the FA Cup by Southampton. Manchester City thrashed Liverpool to heap more pressure on Arne Slot. And of course, there's another new face in the Spurs dugout. Joining me to discuss it all, Chief Correspondent for The Times and Sunday Times, Martin Samuel. Jason Burt, the Chief Football Correspondent for The Telegraph, and The Sun's football reporter, Jack Rosser. Great to have you all here. Let's see what's making the headlines this morning. Saints alive is the headline in the Sunday Telegraph as Southampton end Arsenal's treble hopes. They also reference quotes from Arne Slot, who says his team lack fighting spirit following their 4-0 defeat to Manchester City. Those two stories feature heavily on the back of The Sun as Erling Haaland's hat-trick keeps City's hopes of a domestic treble alive. They also include an emphatic win for Chelsea over Port Vale. A good end to a bad week, they say. Slipping away is the headline in the Sunday Times as Arsenal crash out of a second competition in the space of 2 games. A delighted Erling Haaland is pictured on the front of the Observer Sport. The Express cover that match too, plus how Paul McGinley believes Rory McIlroy could go back-to-back and win the Masters again next week. And we'll talk Spurs on the week they appointed Roberto De Zerbi as their new head coach. But can he save them from relegation? Yeah, so much to talk about, but the big headlines, I guess, have been made by Southampton at St Mary's in the FA Cup quarter-final last night. Martin, brilliant win for Southampton. We will, of course, come to them in a moment, but the big headline is, of course, Arsenal. 49 games this season, they had 3 defeats, and they've now lost back-to-back in 2 different competitions. Blip or a crisis?
Well, it's not a crisis because they're 9 points clear in the league. They're in the quarterfinals of the Champions League, and if you'd have said at the start of the season, would you take that? There's not an Arsenal fan that wouldn't bite your hands off for that. So it's not a crisis, but when an elite team, as Arsenal are, lose a big match like they lost the Carabao Cup final and are outplayed as they were at the Carabao Cup final, you immediately look at how do they bounce back? What's their reaction to this? And they've gone to Southampton and lost. It's not their first team. You know, there's no Declan Rice, there's no Timber. But it wasn't a great Arsenal performance. They're out of 2 competitions. The 2 competitions they've still in are the biggest ones. But they're also the hardest to win because you've got Manchester City closing. The interesting thing I thought yesterday is that the level of performance, I know we'll come on to Man City later in the programme, but the level of performance of Manchester City against Liverpool, I don't think I've seen Arsenal play like that all season. They've played really well in their own way, but you haven't seen them turn in a performance like the one that City put on Liverpool yesterday. And you look at that and you think, this could be interesting. This could get interesting now.
Jason, Kit Shepherd from the Sunday Times was at the game. Season stalls at wrong time for sloppy, panicked Arsenal is the headline. Just a quote from his piece. This is how a season begins to unravel. Of course, Arsenal campaign is far from a lost cause and Southampton deserve huge credit for engineering this upset. But Mikel Arteta's side was sloppy, panicked and outwitted on the South Coast. Martin alluded to it there. It wasn't their first team, but this game was like sandwiched in between that international break as well, wasn't it? Whereby there was a lot of criticism towards Arsenal and Mikel Arteta for the number of player withdrawals that there were from the internationals. How big a test is this now for Arteta, not only on the pitch, but off it as well?
No, I think it is. I think it absolutely is. I think we thought with the Carabao Cup final, then the international break, you thought, well, actually, that's not too bad for Arsenal in terms of giving them some time to reset, go again for this cup tie, and then going into this huge week of having Sporting Lisbon away, and then I think it's Bournemouth, isn't it, the next in the Premier League? But no, I think the interest is really that they've not been here. They've been here before in terms of trying to win things, but they've not got over the line yet. And that's why the questions will be asked and the focus will be on Arteta, because like everyone's looking to him now to try and steady the ship and try and get them, obviously into the two major tournaments they really want to win, the Champions League and the Premier League. I think, as Martin said, if you said from the start of the season you'd be in the last day of the Champions League and 9 points clear of the Premier League, but you'd be out of the two domestic cups, they'd probably go, yeah, fine, absolutely no problem at all with that. But the point is, they've got to now do it. And there'll be a lot of nervousness around the place. The fans, doesn't take an awful lot for the anxiety to grow with Arsenal supporters, does it, really? And you could see a little bit of that last night. So, yeah, no, it's absolutely a huge test. And it's quite a quick turnaround now to go to Lisbon. Sporting aren't bad. If they go there and get another poor performance, poor result, it does start to be really nervous times for them.
And they've spoken about the anxiety themselves as well. I think Declan Rice has spoken about it a bit of being aware that there's a lot of pressure on. They know that they haven't done this before. I think whenever we look at the title race, City don't look or haven't looked like their old selves for most of the season, but everyone always says, well, they've done it before, so we know they can do it again. There's still so many questions about this Arsenal side, and it doesn't look like they're convinced themselves that they can answer them, because you see if they slip a bit, the players are incredibly frustrated with themselves publicly and speaking about that, and it just feels like that they can't quite get a grip of themselves to get over the line. Like you said, it wasn't their first team yesterday, but for the fact that it was a 16-year-old that was the only one that was impressing, the best player for them, the only one really trying to take on a championship team, that says a lot about the players that are stepping in as well.
The one thing they've got in their favour, the one thing, is they don't have to be Manchester City. They're 9 points clear, so they don't have to balance the ball on their nose. They're not performing seals. What they have to do is just be Arsenal. And I know people say, oh, it's functional, it's set piece, it's this, it's that. Doesn't matter. You've just got to be yourselves and get over the line. That's what they cannot get distracted by or into is in suddenly now trying to be expansive. There might have been a stage in the season when they could have been a little bit more expansive than they are. Now's not the time.
What I thought was interesting yesterday is they started to change the corners. They're starting doing short corners.
And
I was thinking, why are you doing that?
Exactly.
Why are you doing that now? Yeah. It's like you've been so effective at these corner routines, and then suddenly you're changing. And OK, fine, they've got this set piece expert who can do that. But I'm thinking, just come off an international break. You've not really practiced that very much on the training ground, surely. And you're doing it now? It's like, why are you doing this now? Having made such a weapon of it all season and being like obviously in people's heads almost, the Arsenal on set pieces. Why are you changing it? I thought that was fascinating they started to do that yesterday.
And it's the one thing as well, I did an interview with the Southampton goalkeeper this week, and part of it is you say, are you ready for this? Because they've been all right at set pieces themselves, Southampton, more attacking than defending, but you say, how are you going to deal with this? And it's just sort of, we've got to grin and bear it. We've just got to fight and hang in there, and they don't even put them up to that test.
So that slightly worries me that if they then start doing other things tactically to change things, they've got so far the way they've been playing, just don't change it. Just get back to, as Martin says, get back to being what you can do. And they don't have to win at City, but the problem is they've got this Champions League quarter-final, they've got another league game before them. What state will they be in when they arrive at City? And if City play like they did yesterday, I mean, to be honest, I think they'll beat Arsenal, no matter what Arsenal did if they play like they did yesterday. And the other thing about that, just to labour the point a little bit, is like, if you look at City yesterday, you do look at them thinking, how are you 9 points behind Arsenal?
Absolutely.
And that's not to criticise Arsenal, it's just to say how good they are. You're thinking, how are you 9 points behind?
Yeah.
It's a compliment to Arsenal that they're 9 points ahead. But then you look at City and think, actually, no, you should not be that far behind.
No, you were looking at them yesterday, City, and thinking, well, you haven't played like this all season. And then you had that thought, and then you're looking at it and going, yeah, but Arsenal haven't played like this all season either. So no one's played like City did yesterday.
The perspective they've got to have, I think, instead of getting inside their own head of we need to bounce back now, is the sort of wider one that a lot of the pieces today are sort of going, oh no, it might only be a double now.
Well, it's funny you should say it, because in your paper, your colleague Charlie White in The Sun on Sunday says from the quadruple to a treble, and admittedly we should say this, I've been to nearly every single one of Mikel Arteta's press conferences. He doesn't mention the quadruple. It's the cliche. It's the cliche. It's the next game that matters. But Charlie says from the quadruple to a treble, and now Arsenal are left with just a double. Are they actually going to deliver the greatest choke in football history and end up with nought? Surely not. But if he is not careful, the season for Mikel Arteta could crumble into a disaster. The word bottle is constantly used with Arsenal, Jack. But as much as Mikel Arteta will try and ignore that talk, there must be some scar tissue from previous seasons. And is that going to be Arsenal's biggest challenge, to try and overcome that?
Absolutely, yeah. I think that's where we've seen Declan Rice coming off the pitch somewhere this season saying not again, or we've done it again, something along those lines, which shows you that it is there. It's in their heads that they've fallen short one time too many, really. I think second in the last 3 seasons. That will be on their mind until they do it. There's no way they can get rid of that thought until they have crossed the line. But the perspective they've got to have, as I was just saying, is that a double would be incredible. 22 years since they've won the Premier League.
Well,
yeah, well, exactly.
Win the league.
A
They've won the
title would
league
be
in 20
incredible.
years. You know.
A double would be unbelievable, beyond their dreams they could have had at the start of this season. And you do that in 2 months' time, and you park all this anxiety, you park all this worry, you're a much stronger side going forward. But they won't be able to get past whether it is a mental block or not, just that thing in the back of their heads until they've done it.
I think it's just about winning the Premier League. That's why.
Yeah.
Champions League, fantastic. But even that, you're coming down to one game at the end of the season. The anxiety will be amazing then. But just win the Premier League. If they win the Premier League, they've had an amazing season. A brilliant season, complete success. If they don't win the Premier League...
Go on.
Sorry. Well, no, because they've got to take advantage of this moment. There is no. I keep making this point. There is no guarantee. You are not. There's no such thing in football as being the next cab off the rank.
No.
You know.
We think that, but
it doesn't happen. If you look at all the times when Lee Westwood could have won a major golf tournament, when he was #1 player in the world. It didn't happen for him. Colin Montgomery the same. Just because you've come second 3 consecutive seasons doesn't mean that eventually you'll come first, because if you look at it last year, they're waiting for Man City to slip up. Man City slipped up, Liverpool came in. You don't know what Manchester United are going to be next season. Manchester United look as if they're getting closer and closer all the time. You don't know what any of these, Liverpool will make changes, Liverpool will have a fit Isak and everything. You don't know what Liverpool are going to be next season. So you've got to take the opportunity this time. And they'll know that as well.
It's a great phrase in Portuguese football, is that eat while the food is hot. And that's exactly what it is. You've got to take that moment, and Martin's right. We think you're building, but it doesn't. It's not logical. It doesn't. You've got to take your opportunity, and that's why last season I felt was such a terrible one for Arsenal in a way that you've been pushing Man City so hard, and then suddenly Liverpool come past you, and you're sitting there thinking, "Whoa, well, how did that happen?" So that's why this season they've got to get over the line.
Jason, just picking up on what you said before about the short corner routine that they employed yesterday, on a broader scale, really, and what Arsenal are doing. We were talking about the word bottle and the last 3 seasons when they finished second, but they were roundly praised in a few of those seasons for the style of play. This time, they're being criticised and they're 9 points clear. Is that the key? They've just got to keep strong and just say, ignore all of this noise, just get this one over the line, because then it can be a platform for future seasons, can't it?
Absolutely. I mean, I think if they win this season, obviously, the football's not at times been the greatest, but what I would then hope from them is that next season they do play a little bit better, because they've got the confidence of being the champions, and they can play a little bit more expansively and a little bit more openly, because Mikel Arteta has changed the style deliberately. It's not just happened. He's done this deliberately, because they used to play a little bit more expansive and they weren't a bit more vulnerable. Now he's made them incredibly hard to beat. And, very sort of, not functional, but we know exactly what they do, and it's worked very, very well. That's why I was surprised yesterday, looking at it, thinking, I know Martinelli almost scored from one, but I'm starting to think, well, if you're changing it now, are you obviously freshening it up, or have you lost a little bit of faith in what you were doing? And I'm wondering whether some of the players would be sitting there thinking, why are we doing this now? Because before it was working for us, now we're changing it. It might just be a temporary thing. They thought, we'll just try and change it up into this one game, but I was slightly surprised they did it.
There's a Rugby World Cup final where England gets sucked in to trying to play this very expansive style of rugby by Australia. Australia are chipping at them all the way through the tournament. They get to the final, they play Australia, and England changed the way they played as if they were right. We'll show you we can play expansive rugby, and Australia beat England playing a very functional, playing exactly like England. You can't fall into that trap. You can't fall into trying to be Man City.
And they'll love it as well. They won't care how they're playing. They win the title playing like this, and we all go, one of the worst champions in history. They'll love that. They'll thrive on that.
Who's they, though? You think the fans or the club?
players, I think.
I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure.
Really?
Well, if they win it, of course. But I just think I wonder whether some of them are sitting there thinking, we can do a bit more, and maybe if we had the handbrake off a little bit more, we could do a bit more here. That's what I'm wondering.
Martin, just on how Southampton approached this game, is that maybe a slight worry for Arsenal, because they went direct and they got big results out of going direct and long against Arsenal last night?
Yeah, but they're a good team. I thought they played really well. We should hear from Jack on this, really, rather than me. But I mean, I'll hand over to Jack in about 2 seconds. But I thought they played really well. I was very, very impressed with Southampton. If you were a Wrexham fan or whatever, you'd be looking over your shoulder thinking, "Oh, this is not good," because they look like a team that should be in the playoffs. You only hope they don't get too sort of distracted in by being in a semi-final. But again, it was fantastic looking at the fans and stuff like that, and the excitement. You love it when a team achieves something in the cup and you can see how much it actually means. It's not just, another trip to Wembley. How are we going to afford that? It costs us a fortune. They're delighted. Everyone was delighted to be going to Wembley. I thought it was fantastic.
Jack, here's your moment. Without giving away who you support, of course. The Sunday Telegraph focuses on Southampton. Southampton stun Arsenal in the FA Cup. Saints alive is the headline there. And if I can just direct you to the Sunday Times, and Kit Shepherd, we've quoted from his piece before, but there are two teams to this story, though, which we should highlight as well. And Southampton's season has been madcap. After a dismal start, Tonda Eckert came in as interim manager, turned the team's fortunes around. And I know when newspapers always put the surname of a player or a manager and put their age straight after, I think it's pretty relevant here. Eckert, 33, was at the heart of the triumph. This is an extraordinary story, isn't it?
It is. It's incredible. Before the last round, when they knocked out Premier League opposition in Fulham, we did a piece with him, and he's a fascinating guy. I think they called him a geek or a nerd on commentary last night, which definitely fits him. But he's a lovely guy, and he's got a fascinating backstory. He was never really a player. He was in an academy in Berlin, and then went into being an analyst. Worked on the 2014 World Cup with Germany, helped them win that. Analysed Brazil for that semi-final, that incredible semi-final, and has then just slowly built up through in terms of coaching, coached in Bayern's academy, and was brought in as the under-21s manager. He's never managed senior football before. He was at Barnsley as an assistant for a couple of years ago when they had a run to the playoffs. But the idea, I think, was that Will Still would have the team and have a couple of years with them and maybe get poached by a bigger club if all went well, and then maybe they'd look at Tonda Eckert further down the line. Got thrown in November when they're fourth from bottom in the Championship, which is obviously a horrendous start for a club coming down for the Premier League, as bad as they were in the Premier League last year. Had an incredible start, but then a slump as well, and I think that's the most impressive thing. They were really poor over Christmas, and they've managed to, well, Eckert, especially himself, has managed to find a way to turn it around, and they're now 15 games unbeaten, with obviously the most impressive one being last night. Just
very quickly before we go to a break, is Southampton's biggest challenge now? You mentioned Will Still staying there for a couple of years and getting poached by a bigger club. Is that now going to be the problem with Eckert? Is that Southampton's biggest challenge to try and keep hold of him?
I think potentially, if he gets them up, then that is a problem. I can't see anyone poaching him quite just yet, because there will be some unknowns around him. We saw with Russell Martin what he did at Southampton, and then how quickly that went sour in the Premier League. I think their biggest problem now would just be keeping their feet on the ground before what could be the first of 3 trips to Wembley this season.
Fantastic. Brilliant stuff, guys. Plenty more to come on Sunday Supplement. Welcome back to Sunday Supplement. Let's focus on events at the Etihad yesterday afternoon. And a very, very bad afternoon for Liverpool. Thrashed 4-0 in the FA Cup quarter-final by Manchester City. The Sun on Sunday goes with things on what they used to be. Jason, we'll come to what was a magnificent Manchester City performance in a moment. I know you touched on it in part 1, but first, Let's talk Liverpool, destroyed by City, the pressure seemingly piling now on Arne Slot. Was that as bad as it's been under Slot, do you feel?
Yeah, I do, actually. I think when you've got fans leaving after an hour, which is very unusual for Liverpool fans in particular, when you've got people talking afterwards about the lack of fight rather than anything else, really, I think this is not what you expect from Liverpool. I think a lot of people will be hurting around that. And I think with Slot, I think it's going to be quite clear with him. If they don't get Champions League football in one shape or form, either by winning it or by qualifying through the league, I think he will go. I do think he'll go. I think there are an awful lot of mitigating circumstances around that. Obviously, it's been a difficult season. The passing of Diogo Jota in particular, people shouldn't underplay that. But I think they will look at it very forensically and think we have underachieved and we're not quite sure we can carry on like this. Now, Liverpool are saying the opposite at the moment. They're saying they're fully back the manager. But I think that the fact is it's been made very clear they've got to qualify for the Champions League. And if you listen to Arne Slot talking after the game yesterday, he talked about the importance of qualifying for the Champions League because he knows that's the situation. It may be very tough and a bit unfair on him considering what's happened this season, the way it's been. But I think Liverpool are going into a very big summer for them. They'd won last season, obviously, but I think this summer it'll be interesting what happens off the pitch as much as on it. In terms of, we're looking at Richard Hughes maybe possibly going the sporting director. The talk of him going to Saudi Arabia is not going away. Again, Liverpool is saying he's going nowhere, but he's only got one more year left on his contract, as has Michael Edwards, as has Arne Slot. So the three of them at the moment are going to go into the final years of their contract as things stand. So that makes me think we're heading for a change of sorts. So it could be even at the top of the club, or it could be in the dugout, and obviously on the pitch as well. There'll be lots of changes. So I think there's an awful lot in play at the moment with Liverpool. And I think he's under a lot of pressure and he has to qualify for the Champions League.
Jack, Jason mentioned the lack of fight from the Liverpool players. Arne Slot focused on that as well, and a lot of the newspapers this morning have gone with those quotes that Liverpool lacked fight, which is a damning indictment for any manager. Jonathan Northcroft from the Sunday Times was at the game, and something that Jason mentioned there about the fans, Liverpool fans streaming to the exits, Arne Slot standing alone without a dream in his heart, the good days as far off as any blue moon. Jason mentioned it there. It's very unlike Liverpool fans to do that. But the fact that they are leaving, the fact that they are voicing their displeasure against their own manager, has he lost the fans or is he close to losing them?
I think he's very close to. They're a club that, like Jason said, has long stood by managers and internally is still standing by their manager, but that, it's a commendable stance, but it's coming square in the face with reality. Like, that's the real test it's being put under. I think the fans will be most concerned. They're not seeing a convincing team. Yesterday, they were absolutely played off the park by a very good team. Before the break, they went to Brighton, who have picked up a bit, but have had an odd season and nothing incredibly special this year. They're not the team of McAllister, Caicedo that they were a few years ago. And they crumbled. Liverpool played well for half an hour yesterday, concede, and they're gone. They played all right at Brighton for a bit, but can't stay in a game, can't hit back when they concede against Brighton. And they did have a few injuries that day. They didn't have a striker. But they don't look a team with a plan. They're trying a couple of things. Slot moved every player into almost every position that day and couldn't come up with an answer. Sits in the press conference afterwards, and while he wasn't having a go at their fight or the basics then, he said he doesn't want to make excuses and then listed off as many as he could think of. They don't seem like, on the pitch or in the dugout, they know where they want to go or where they want to be, which is a huge concern after the outlay they made, which at the time everyone sits there and, like you say, similar to what we were talking about with Arsenal being the next cab off the rank, where they've won the league and they've spent 450 million, they'll storm it next year. That was the opinion last summer.
Yeah.
And now it looks incredibly misguided. They've spent 80 million on one striker and then undermined him by spending 125 on another one. They don't know that he's going to get injured, but that hasn't worked out. The fullbacks haven't worked out. They look like they maybe picked them up a bit too early or tried to make the change with Robertson a bit too early. It all looks and feels a bit muddled at the moment.
We'll come to the recruitment in just a moment. But Martin, it might be a bit crazy to say it just now, but it could yet be an extraordinary season for them because they're still in the Champions League, albeit against the holders, Paris Saint-Germain midweek. Jason mentioned that Slot's job is going to come down to qualifying for the Champions League next season. There are two ways to do it, of course, to win it or to finish what looks like the top five. But do you think that that would keep him in a job if it is to be top 5 and not winning the trophy?
I think potentially it would. They seem quite patient with their managers, Fenway Sports Group. And Slot has got a lot of credit in the bank from the first season. You look at this second season, and if you're looking for mitigating circumstances, the Salah situation has been problematic. Losing Trent Alexander-Arnold has been problematic. They didn't get the centre half that they should have got, and that's been a weakness all season. Obviously, what happened with Diogo Jota would take a terrible toll on any club, and it certainly has on Liverpool. So there's lots of mitigating factors that the board could look at if they want to keep Slot. And the reason they would look at them, I would think, is if they're in the Champions League again next season. Certainly if they were to go anywhere near winning, if they, beating Paris Saint-Germain, which I don't think will happen, but beating Paris Saint-Germain would be a huge thing for him. But so I think there's reasons to keep him. I think there's reasons for them to keep faith if they wanted to keep faith. If he doesn't make the Champions League, it's going to be difficult.
Yeah. Jason, Rory Smith in The Observer picks up on something that you'd said about Liverpool backing him. He says, look, the message from inside Liverpool has been consistent. Arne Slot has not become a bad manager overnight. He remains the unheralded coach who walked into the Premier League, and after a summer in which he signed just one player, won it at the first attempt. The problem, of course, is the one that was encapsulated once by Mike Tyson. Their track record over the past decade might warrant no small degree of trust and respect, but that is how everyone thinks until they are, in Tyson's words, punched in the mouth. Now, he is taking a lot of the flack for what's happened so far this season. And we mentioned what looked like an incredible transfer window last summer, but was it a little bit lopsided? And is he to blame for that?
No, he's not solely to blame for that at all, because to a degree, and I don't mean Jurgen Klopp won the title last season, but he won it with Jurgen Klopp's team, and that's the compliment to him. Obviously, he made changes in the position of Gravenberch and the way they played, and did fantastically well. But even he last season was saying that there are flaws in the way they're playing, the flaws in the way that he wants to play. Didn't have I can't remember the way he was talking mainly was that they're not creating enough chances or something like that. He was talking about. But I also think that Michael Edwards and Richard Hughes wanted to put their stamp on the team, they wanted to put their stamp on the club. And I think that's what happened last summer. It was a collective thing. Slot was definitely part of that. But I think collectively they wanted to get more of a stamp on it. They had obviously had a couple of windows where they hadn't spent an awful lot of money. I think only Chiesa had come in and so on. So there was money there. They could change things. I think they felt they needed to change things. The extent to which they changed things probably surprised some of us that it went so far. I thought it'd be 3 or 4 players, and obviously then it started growing and growing. Jack's point, I couldn't agree more with on Isak. I think once you bought Ekitike, you leave it. You leave it and you concentrate on the centre half. And not buying Mark Gahey, I think, was dereliction of duty. That deal was there to be done, and they were trying to be too clever. They left it too long, too late, and it didn't happen. And I think that's the deal that's hurt them the most. And you see the difference Mark Gahey has made to Manchester City when he's gone in there. If I'm John W. Henry, I'm saying to those guys, listen, how did you let that? I'm sure he has said that. How did you let that happen? Because it wasn't a huge amount of money, but they waited and waited and waited. And I think with Isak, I think there was just a point when you walked away from that and left it and looked at the priorities. You're Liverpool, you don't need to wait to the last minute. We know Newcastle were always going to sell if you got to a certain number, and they got close to that number and they did the deal. So I think they should have walked away from that. But I think they almost felt, we're Liverpool, we want to get in, we're going to do it and get it done. And I think it's left them quite lopsided, as Jack says. And
another deal that's come under scrutiny, Jack, is Mohamed Salah's new contract. Of course, the Mail on Sunday goes, Mo's farewell tour threatens to turn into a funeral march. He has been at the centre of what has happened at Liverpool last season and this season, the poster boy of their success and almost the poster boy of their failures as well. What is the approach now? Because they want to give him the send-off that he deserves, and yet they need to qualify for the Champions League and go as far as they can in this season's Champions League. Does he warrant the starting place now?
Not at the moment on his form, no, but their options aren't fantastic. We've seen, I mentioned the Brighton game where Slot was changing people around left, right and centre and nobody impressed. So maybe just because of who he is, he keeps that place. I think you said there's scrutiny on the deal, which, yes, in hindsight, looks a mistake to have given him that contract, but it would have been deemed madness not to have given him the deal at the end of last season. He was absolutely incredible. Won PFA Player of the Year, FWA Player of the Year for the third time, drove them to the title almost on his own. So it would have been insanity not to have tried to keep him last season. No one could have seen the incredible drop-off coming this year. They can't get sentimental if Slot's the one whose job's on the line, and between him and Salah, it's a player that they clearly don't see eye to eye. Salah's come through him very publicly with that interview did in the mix zone at Leeds. Slot isn't going to concern himself with making sure Salah gets a nice send-off if getting across the line into the top 5 or winning the Champions League is on the line, and he's not convinced that he can deliver what he needs, and there's not a lot of evidence that he can.
I think the whole farewell tour thing is a mistake. I mean, basically, they're not in a position where they can have a farewell tour.
No.
You know, there shouldn't be any sentiment. There's no sentiment. They've got to finish in the Champions League. They've got to do better than this. It's interesting yesterday that obviously Salah had the chances, didn't score, his confidence looked drained, and he stayed on the pitch till quite. And you're thinking he should have come off. He should have been first change. And it's almost like you're thinking Arne Slot's thinking, can I take him off? Yeah. Can I take him off? And he took him off right at the end. And you're thinking, well, what's the point of that?
I thought exactly that.
He should have been first change. He should have come off.
Exactly that. When he made those changes, you're thinking, well, it's got to be Salah.
And I think even Salah was probably surprised he stayed on the pitch.
Yeah.
You know, because it would have been the right change to get him off. And I think that the problem is they can't afford to let this become a sentimental thing, because it's going to undermine them.
On the flip side, Manchester City, it's looking pretty ominous that the front page of The Observer is a picture of Erling Haaland celebrating yet another hat-trick for Manchester City, yet another career hat-trick as well, treble threat. I don't think we were talking about this a few weeks ago. And in the Sunday Telegraph, James Ducker, who was at the game, says City are finding momentum at the right time. Haaland is back in the goals. Semenyo cannot stop scoring. Rodri has found his groove again. And in Cherki, they have a playmaker who can unlock any defence. We touched on it before, but these are suddenly reasons for Arsenal to feel a little bit fearful, aren't they?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, Haaland, I think, is that his 28th career hat-trick? I mean, he's just phenomenal. He's just one of those strikers that scores in torrents of goals when he scores. It was a phrase that I heard used about Jimmy Greaves once, that he scored in torrents. And you think, that's like Haaland, that he'll go on these runs and you're looking at it, you just see it on a table and it's like 3 and 1 and 1 and 2 and then there's another 3. It's just fantastic. So when he fires, then obviously City fire. And everything that James says there is absolutely right. You know, Rodri is playing well again. Haaland's in exceptional form. The team look really good going for. I mean, there is still no team like Manchester City when it all clicks.
I would say it's 2 or 3 weeks too late.
Yeah, possibly.
Say. Yeah. Should we forget they went out to Real Madrid? If they'd played like that yesterday against Real Madrid, they would still be in the Champions League. Totally. So I think it is actually 2 or 3 weeks too late, and I think that even Arsenal should still, look at that and think we've got the advantage here. You know, we can get over the line. It's only 7 games to go or something for them. If it was 10, if it was 12, then you think. That would make City the favourites, but now obviously Arsenal are.
Just picking up on Manchester City, Jonathan Northcroft, of course, the focus has been on Liverpool, but he does talk about Guardiola. He says whether or not this is his last season, he's watching the rebuilding of a team coming to fruition, promising, regardless of whether they can add this season's FA Cup or even Premier League title to the Carabao Cup, bright years for City are ahead. And I read an article by your good self earlier on in the week where Pep's going to wait until the end of the season. Yeah. How difficult a position is this for City, though? Because some will say rightly so, Pep Guardiola deserves to decide when he will leave. But it leaves City in a bit of limbo, doesn't it?
I don't think they've got much choice in the matter.
No, exactly. Pep does what Pep does.
But that's always been the case with Pep. I think, as Martin will know as well, that he will decide his own future. City are not going to tell him, you have to tell us now. It's not going to work like that. What's interesting is, so up until Christmas, I think he hasn't told anyone what he's going to do. And I think a lot of people in football I've taken that to mean he's going, right? And even people at City are thinking, right, we've got to prepare for the fact that he's going, which is sensible, totally sensible. Hugo Viana has to have his ducks in a row. He's got to be ready to go if it happens. But I didn't think it was definitely a possibility. I didn't think it was a possibility really until the last couple of months, where people have started talking to me a bit more about maybe he is going. But I do think he doesn't really know himself yet. I do genuinely think there's days when he probably wakes up and thinks, I'm done with this. I've had enough of this. Yeah. And then there are days like yesterday where he's probably thinking, how can I walk away from this and this team? So you can, and also you look at that two ways, because he doesn't want to leave them in a bad state. So he's talked like a man who's going to be there next season. This team's going to be better next season. These players are going to be better next season. And you think, he's definitely staying then. Mm-hmm. And then he says, well, but the way of looking at that is he's leaving them in a good situation for the next guy. He doesn't want to be in a situation where he walks away without trophies and a team that's in transition, or a team that's not doing well. He's a proud man. Whenever he walks away, he wants to walk away in a situation like, I've left you this team. I've left you this good situation with trophies in the cabinet. So I don't know 100% what he's going to do. The longer it goes on, the more I think it could well be the end, 10 years and out. But I 100% don't know what he's going to do yet.
3 quick fire questions to all of you, and I'm going to put you on the spot. First of all, will Pep Guardiola be in charge of City next season?
I don't know. You don't know.
I don't
None
know.
of us know.
Right, none of
he
you
doesn't know.
Okay, Arne Slot, will he be in charge of Liverpool next season?
Yes.
I think they'll qualify for the Champions League.
Yeah, he will.
Finally, who wins the league?
Arsenal.
Go on, I'll go City.
But you just said no.
I know.
Controversial.
Because you two said Arsenal, so I'll say City.
You don't have to be
Say it quicker.
controversial. It's a sensible
If only
thought.
you predicted the start of the season, you can't all do the same one.
No, that's right. Yeah.
Somebody's got to be contrary.
That's true. Fantastic stuff. Right. Still